Oh man, you still have that beard.
Yeah, man, I gotta keep
It's
it. It's a part of the brand now.
It's delightful. How
I
long
like
have you
that
had that?
mustache. I like
Oh,
that
thank
mustache
you.
too, man.
Thank you. Thank you. How long have you had that by chance? Because when I saw you at Westside, it was been like,
Yeah.
must have been 6 some odd years ago. Like you
I've
still had a
had
beard
this.
then.
Yeah, I've had this probably since I was 16, 17.
Oh,
So I've
wow.
had it for a while. Yeah. I
So
mean, it
you,
obviously changes and I shape it differently, but yeah,
yeah.
I've had a beard. I've had facial hair since I was like 15.
Okay. So
So
guys, let me ask you this then. Did you ever have the experience like Dwayne Johnson had where he was like 15, 16? They're like, and he went to college, they thought he was like a narc.
yeah.
Like, did anyone ever
Yeah.
think that like, oh, this guy definitely can pass the ID check?
And if I cut my beard, then I looked like I was 12. So I had to keep it going. I
Yeah.
remember I had to cut it one time because I got like some skin irritation. And yeah, it was the worst thing ever. Like I was like, I'm never doing this again. I'm never
Yeah.
shaving it again. So yeah, I look 12, 100%. And I was coaching guys that were like 10 years older than me. So it didn't look good. I was like, you know what? Time to change it up.
Aren't it interesting that some people, total aside from anything we're talking about today, but how some people look great with beards, and then once you get rid of it, you're like, ooh, I see why you have a beard now.
Yeah, man. I'm like the opposite. Like I would say this. I definitely look okay without a beard. It's just I look super young, and I gained weight after fighting. I gained weight. I gained like 20 pounds because I did a bodybuilding show directly after I retired. And then I did powerlifting, and I was powerlifting for like 10 years. But I really got into it after I retired. And I went up to like 220. So my face blew up and I was waterlogged and everything.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, like doing the beard helps me kind of shape my face a little bit more, and at the end of the day, it's a part of me now. Everybody knows, even the brand, like my logo has
I've seen it. Yeah.
Viking. So
right.
Yeah, gotta keep it. If I cut this, I'm gonna cut this off, but I always keep the beard.
Okay.
I'm actually losing my hair. I'm losing my hair.
Are you really?
Yeah, it sucks, man.
What did you do?
I don't know. Like, I don't know, man. I think maybe stress. I don't know. I mean, I work a lot.
But you live in Florida, though. There's no stress in Florida. That's not allowed.
No, I know it. But I think it's also just like I've been going hard training and killed my body for years.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's all right. It's still there, but it's definitely like if I like comb it through and I lose a couple of hairs, I'm like, So I'm gonna cut it off.
I did a year and a half. I had a giant like Viking braid. I did that, and every time I take it out every 3 weeks, you do your hair, and you're like, oh shit, like I'm going bald. And then I did dreadlocks for a year.
Okay. Wow.
And it was like, and first off, I have a massive appreciation for people who have dreadlocks, white, brown, black, whatever your skin color is. Like it's a pain. It's an absolute pain to maintain. Oh, it's so horrible. Pick those out. Same thing. Like you have all that hair in your head, but I don't know how much of that was just from that or how much of it was from what you were saying where.
I don't know. I hope it's just that.
You think it's just that?
Yeah, I hope so, man.
Yeah,
I hope it's not something crazy. I mean, it's you get it's a little thinning up here. I straightened it. I went to because my hair is super curly, so I had to straighten it out because I couldn't do anything with it. It was almost kind of like yours, but like a little bit more curly.
Yeah.
And I straightened it. I think it killed some of my hair. So I'm like,
just that one time?
Just the one time.
Chemically? Did you do it chemically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Killed it.
All right. So I remember when I was setting up my dreads, and I remember the woman I found, like, a black woman. She really knows what she's doing. She was able to take her time with it and like transition it. But she's told me like, oh, so many white dudes will get dreads and they'll like chemical it to get them to seize, and they take it out. Yeah, you will. Oh man.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna cut it, and then just because I've always had it short. I think you see me in Westside. I had it short.
Yeah.
And I think this is pretty much the longest it's been, and it's curly. But if I like pull it down, it goes long.
I can tell it's got like a really curly, like thick wave on it.
Yeah.
Oh hell. So, okay.
But I wanted to go long. I wanted to get it to where like I could braid the top and go all the way through. But I don't know. Plus, I'm doing jujitsu a lot again.
It doesn't play. It just doesn't. It looks great though. If you can pull that off, but like I learned the hard way a couple of times that long hair in a weight room scenario, especially when you're coaching. Yeah. It's just not going to happen, dude. It's something's going to happen. It's going to get yanked out somehow. It's going to get nasty. It just is. Oh, my sweet Jews. So how long you been in Florida?
I've lived here all my life. Yeah, I lived there. Well, I went and played football in Alabama, so Alabama State University in Montgomery.
That's Division
And,
One, right?
yeah, it's Division
Okay.
One.
Yeah.
And I was there for 3-4 years, obviously with college, but I hated it. I hated like every minute of it.
Alabama in general, or
yeah, it was just different because I'm from
Fair.
South Florida. So
Oh,
like,
completely different culture.
it's completely
Oh,
different.
sweet baby Ray. Oh
There's
yeah.
diversity, and it was no diversity whatsoever. It was kind of just
Nothing.
no culture. Like it was bad. So I just as soon as I left, I ended up moving. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, so it's kind of right next to Miami.
Yeah.
And my parents moved up from Fort Lauderdale to this small town in Port St. Lucie, which is like there's nothing there. At the time there was nothing there. Now it's grown. But I was like, man, I got to do something. I got to do like something competitive. And I was fighting. I was boxing. I have a martial arts background. And I was like, I got to get back into martial arts at some capacity, maybe just box, because I was boxing on the off season in college, and then the only thing that I could do there was just the only thing we usually do in Florida, in South Florida, is either you play football, you fight, like you do MMA or jiu-jitsu or something like that, and that's primarily what you would do as an athlete. Some baseball here and there, but it's really football and martial arts.
Yeah.
Or MMA now at this point. So I did that, and then I started working and training, and that's all I did. At the time, I was like, I need to make some money though, because I was just dirt poor at that point. So I was like, all right, I'm going to train some people. I started training people at a local powerlifting gym that I used to train at, and it was like powerlifting, and the guy was a strongman competitor. Tony Montgomery is his name. He's a pretty big name. Still kind of does his thing. But he was training me for fights, and then he finally was like, yo, you want to train some people in the gym? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I need to make some money. So I started working with the athletes. I started working with the high school kids, the football kids. And at the whole time I was still running like Westside stuff. So I was still doing all Louis stuff. And I met Joe DeFranco down that path, and then started working that. So the whole time I was still kind of running Westside. And then I was like, man, how can I do this and really do it? But I had to figure out, because I couldn't train 4 days a week in the weight room. Like it was impossible with all the MMA that I was doing. Yeah. So I did like 2 or 3 day a week splits, and I would just condense the old Westside model. And I condensed it to 2 or 3 days. But the Florida, like as far as Florida, it's always hot. So like I was always getting conditioning, and I was always losing weight. Right. So like a lot of it came from it's humidity, and I think the coldest it's ever gotten here is probably like 50 degrees. It's never gotten anything lower than that, at least from what I remember. That's fair. So I would lose a lot of weight in just one training session. Yeah. So I had to minimize the time I was in there, because if I lost too much weight, then I wouldn't be able to train the 2 hours after. Yeah. So I would have to like minimize everything. So I did like 30, 45 minute goes, and a lot of it was either circuits or just dynamic effort, and then I would be out. But when I got closer to fights, it was more just like contrast training, circuits, things like that. And then I obviously adapted it more when I got more deep into just strength training and coaching. I retired at 26. I think my last fight, I was 25 years old. Actually, yeah, I was 25, turning 26. And I just got, from football and training since I was 7, a numerous amount of concussions. So like, I've had about 8 or 9 concussions that I can count, that I can remember. Oh, the ones you remember, that I 8 remember, or 9. Yeah. Oh yeah, like the bad ones, Oh yeah. The first one I got, I was 8 years old. So what were you doing at 8 years old? I was playing football. So like first concussion ever, man. Like we were doing Oklahoma drills. I remember. Oh yeah, okay. It was like my first drill, my first hitting drill, and just head down. And then he teaches how to hit or tackle back then, this is like, I don't remember. It's like in 2001, something like that, 2002, maybe less than that, maybe 2000. And so I would just crown on my head, just boom, bashing my head into everybody. And this was consistent, obviously all the way through. I played football since I was 7 years old, all the way up to college. So, there was times in high school where I'd get into, I'd hit somebody and I didn't know where I was. I'd be on the sideline thinking I was on the field, and I would be on the field thinking I was on the sideline sometimes. And I was like, what just happened? Like, you know, this was in the game. This was during the game. So it was repeated head trauma in multiple occasions, you know? So then I'm like, okay, well, now I'm going to transition, because I ended up sustaining a lot of pinched nerves and things just going down my spine and my neck, from running into like 300-pound linemen on a daily basis. Now I'm 5'8", and the heaviest. Yeah. So like, you know, and these guys are all 6+, 300 pounds, 250 pounds. I was probably like 195 then.
Oh yeah.
I was playing strong safety.
Yeah.
Like I could run, but it's like, yeah, you know. So I ended up getting a lot of injuries my sophomore year. And I was just like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to sustain this. So I ended up just basically, there was other things, other family issues that came about that too as well. And then my family was kind of just like, listen, we're not doing too well. And the problem back then, NCAA didn't allow us to get jobs. So no money was coming in.
Yeah.
I had nothing. So I had no money. I didn't want to ask my parents for money.
Right.
They didn't have it. And I have a younger sister who's like 10 years younger than me. And she's like kind of like my daughter in a sense. She's like my child because I take care of her.
It's fair. Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I gave up on like, I hate to say give up, but you know, I had to make a decision, and I canceled my scholarship. I came back home. I ended up finishing, you know, my degree back home at IRSC, which is like a state community college. And then after that, I was like, all right, I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to go deep into some type of competition sport. And I was like, I can box, not thinking about concussions, and I can box, I could do MMA, whatever. I didn't want to grapple. That was one thing. But I met a guy that I started with. His name is Dean Thomas. So he's a UFC fighter, one of the first American top team guys. And so he had a gym, and I was like, I started training with him. And he's like, man, listen, you're gonna have to get down to 155. And I was like, I haven't been 155 pounds since I was like in middle school, bro. Like this is crazy. But sure enough, I went down to Coconut Creek top team, and I saw Thiago Alves for the first time, and he fought at 170. And I was like, I get it now. Because Thiago at that time, he was a monster.
Yeah, what was he like in real life? I gotta completely derail this conversation and ask you, what's that guy like in real life? Like when you're watching him move, like what's that like? Apex.
He's a good guy, super good guy. Very respectful. I mean, he's approachable. You know, we still talk to this day. I trained him for a few years, and we actually just talked not too long ago. He came back to the gym. He's doing a lot with Live Trained. It's like an online training video type of deal. So he's doing a lot with that. He's coaching more than anything now. I think he went to bare knuckle and won a title in bare knuckle fighting. So yeah. So I mean, and he's
delightful.
Yeah. That's another sport
that's a whole other world. That's so great.
I got close contact with those. I mean, I have 2-3 guys that I trained for bare knuckle fights, and I cornered them too. And it's probably the worst thing, the most brutal sport that I would have been a part of, as far as being that close involved with them. Yeah, it's like you're always, no matter what, you're gonna get a laceration. You're gonna get
cut. Oh yeah, it's gonna happen.
Without a doubt. Unless you knock the guy out within 6 seconds, you're gonna get something.
Yeah, you're not wearing 12-pound gloves. You know, so I mean, it's not.
No, so yeah, and I just kind of was just like, all right, well, let's make the transition. Let's bring the weight down. So I started getting lower in weight. Yeah. I went from like 198 to like walking around like 180. I fought at 170 for a little bit as an amateur, and then I turned pro and went 155. So I started walking around like 178. But after that, I was like, you know, as far as the training and everything else, it's still, you know how it is. Like with MMA guys, man, we have to constantly be on, and we're training year round. There's no off season.
Correct. Yes.
You know, so and it's like multiple sessions throughout the day. There was a point where when I was younger, when I had no other responsibilities, I was training 3 times a day, and I was 6 or 7 days a week. Like I just didn't care. I wanted to get better, and I hockey sticked, like as far as like my skill level. I already had the natural talent as an athlete, and I had the background with martial arts. So none of the movements were that foreign to me. Throwing a punch, throwing a kick, you know, things like that. There's obviously different styles. Like the Muay Thai kick was a little bit challenging in the beginning, but within the first couple of hours, I ended up getting it and understanding how to whip my leg instead of doing like a karate style side kick. You know, but punching came natural. Even grappling came natural to me because of just I guess the way, because I was like more of a catch wrestler in a sense. I wrestled a little bit in high school, but how you go about, the aggression and everything else, and being strong in different positions. I was very strong. I've always been a stronger kid. Even when I was younger, that was my fight name. They called me Bam Bam, because I was like always like picking up stuff over my head, throwing it,
Okay.
So that kind of came natural. And I've always weight trained since I was 13, 14 years old.
Okay.
So I came, and then that transitioned. So after that, I was just like, all right, I need to get on the mats and start to grapple. And when that happened, I was able to level up my game entirely and try to plug these gaps, because there was a huge gap in the beginning, like as far as my striking and my grappling and all that. The only other hole that I had was like being able to sustain outputs for that longer duration, because of the power sports that I've been in, the more explosive power sports that I've played all my life. It's just like, sprint and rest. And I would do that as I was sparring. And then if you're sparring like a Dean Thomas, who's a veteran, he knows just, okay, cover up until you tire yourself out. And then I'm just gonna
work you to that. Yeah.
So that's exactly what they did. And I would go in like hard spurts, like pop, 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 and I would just back, and then I back up and I just get teed off on.
Right.
So yeah, learning how to have better sustainability throughout the rounds, and recoverability too between the rounds, which is important. So taking a step back and really learning the ins and outs of energy system training was a game changer, not only for myself as an athlete, but for me as a coach. And so I started to really dive deeper into just like all the energy system training, all of physiology in a sense, because there was a gap there in my knowledge base, where I was like, okay, we're just going to go ahead and do circuits, or we're going to do long distance runs. And there was really no gauge on what was most important.
Yeah.
So then I started to dive a little bit deeper. Joel Jamison's book helped out in the beginning. And then from there, it kind of transitioned into actually getting deeper into physiology and understanding like metabolic demands and mitochondrial density, and also high-low approaches, right? So I would take in the beginning, I would do a lot of long distance, low intensity runs, so LSD work. And I would have that sustained throughout the year, because it would just increase my aerobic capacity. Then when I would get closer to fights, then I would keep it more along the lines of repeat sprint ability. So I would still keep that in, because focus points are going to differ depending on timeframes of the camp. But you always have to maintain something. So there was maintenance here, focus here, and then it'd be flipped depending on where we're at.
I follow you.
So yeah, I mean, it worked out. And then I got more of an understanding when I started to coach other fighters at the high level. So because then you have to think about efficiency of movement. You have to think about efficiency inside the cage. So with Dustin Poirier, he's one of my main guys. He's obviously one of the most known fighters that I have. He can literally come off the couch, not doing anything. And he never does that, but this is something.
Extreme example. Yeah,
extreme example. But he can come off the couch and basically do 10, 12 rounds of sparring easily and still be fine, and do that with a guy that's in camp, that's already in shape, because he's so efficient in there. And there's no anxiety. So he's super comfortable, and that was one thing that I didn't understand until I got to a point where I was training these elite guys, where their efficiency of movement, and the efficiency of sport specific movement was there. So now I'm like, all right, what do I got to do to increase this? Well, then I got to take them out of their sport specific movements. I got to go more general. I have to build up their general fitness. And if you look at it, like the same instance, if I took Dustin out of that and I made him do prowler pushes for 10, 20 yard sprints and then rest for 10 seconds, he'd die within the third sprint, because it's just a different stimulus.
Right.
So I was giving him all these different stimuluses to basically fill the gaps in all the other energy systems, and also vary the intensities and vary the situation so that he's ready no matter whatever happens inside there. Because in sparring, you can kind of dictate the pace, but in a fight, you really can't dictate the pace if your opponent is trying to dictate the pace. You see what I'm saying? So, and especially in MMA, there's like breaks in rhythm, right? So there's spurts of striking, and then there might be a takedown, or there may be some type of wall work that you have to do. You have to maintain your stability. And then when you're on the ground, that's a whole different type of movement, right? It's a whole different type of stressor. So all these things are transitioning. And I had to make sure that they were able to, when they did make that transition, they were able to cope with those stresses put upon them.
Gotcha. Okay, so going back to when you were getting your start, and Coach Montgomery was like, "Hey, do you want to help coach?" Was this coaching, was it on the mat type coaching, or was it weight room, or was it a combined of the two? And like, what was your philosophy at that time? Was it dictated by him, or did you come up with your
No,
own system?
no. I mean, it was solely on Louis' system,
Okay.
from Westside. It was more that because I knew that
Hmm.
worked.
Okay.
There was other things though, like I would teach them, like with the offensive linemen, we teach them like we do pad work with them, teach them hand skills and hand-eye coordination. But most of the stuff was in the weight room. Most of the
Okay.
stuff was training that, because that's where I felt, well, when it came down to athletes, that's where I felt most comfortable, where I could teach them the most.
Okay.
If they wanted to grapple, we grapple, but it wasn't, it was more of a weight room type of deal.
Okay.
I wasn't the guy that was going to teach them, how to properly set up for a 40-yard dash or anything like that, because that wasn't my thing at that time.
Right.
The time really was like, all right, biomechanics, special strengths, and then learning how to put that all into play for that particular sport, whether it be football, baseball. I think we're doing football, baseball, and track athletes. So my whole thing was like, all right, let's increase force production, because a lot of these kids were younger, they were high school. So gaining some general fitness and then increasing force production was the main thing.
Do you remember the first thing that you did? I've had this conversation with a couple of strength coaches off camera, that you're really into like Westside Conjugate System, but you find this one area where you think to yourself, if I did this, which is contraindicated to what Lou's saying or the Westside system saying, if I did this, it's going to benefit them more. Do you remember the first thing you're like, if Lou never said to do this, or this was never a Westside thing, or this is never a thing I've done for 5 or 6 years, but I've just learned this, and if I inject this, this is going to make a massive difference? Do you remember the first thing you did? Because obviously your philosophy now is not far removed, but it has evolved based on your experience.
Yeah. Well, we don't live in absolutes either. So like,
Right.
at the, like, sometimes we will use a condensed conjugate model. I call it condensed conjugate. It's something I termed, but in some cases we may have to do like some general block training if they do have the time frame to do it. Like we may do some phase potentiation work,
Okay.
or we may do, some triphasic, right? And I do a lot of triphasic only off camp, right? Because we got to build up their ability to actually lift weights. They don't know how to, a lot of them don't know how to lift weights. A lot of them don't know how to put tension on the bar.
How long do you run each phase? I'm sorry, I got to interject there. How long do you run each phase? Is it typical 4 weeks, or do you?
Yeah, it's usually a 3-week up, 1 week down. But then like let's say for instance, this happens all the time. Like a guy will have a fight lined up in 8 weeks, and then the fight gets canceled, and now we have to wait. Oh, the fight gets rescheduled 2 weeks after. So that's why conjugate was so vital for me, because I can keep them progressing no matter what. But in the case of like my UFC guys or world champions that I know, they know when the fight's going to happen. And this rarely happens too, because a lot of times these guys don't even know when they're going to fight. The top of the top, even like Dustin hasn't fought in a year. He's finally getting his fight with Michael Chandler, but like, there was things where I had to keep him on a general block for almost 8 months,
just in a holding pattern, ready to,
holding pattern. And he would take some months off, you know what I mean? Because, he wants to spend time with his family. He wants to, de-stress. And there's other cases, like I got Kevin Lee. Now he just had an ACL tear in the fight. In the fight, he actually, he's already had 2 ACL tears before me. He just started training with me. This is the first time him actually training with me. He's never done any real weight training, by the way. So there's a difference.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
He has.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that we do is improving on general movement patterns, and for right now is getting that knee where it needs to be, because we don't necessarily have the time for him to get surgery. He wants to fight, and he's signed to a promotion, Eagle FC, that wants him to be the front runner. So he left the UFC, or they, whatever they did there, and now he's like the guy in Eagle FC. So an instance like this, like he was supposed to fight in November. No, he was supposed to fight in October. They canceled that fight. Now we're trying to fight in November. So there was that, we were about to start our in-camp, condensed conjugate. Now I'm taking him back out of that, and then we're just focused on building up that knee, making sure that his hamstrings are strong, making sure that everything else is moving appropriately. So like a lot of the stuff that I do is corrective based. in those instances, especially for the guys that are at the higher level or have years in the game. There was a time where I was coaching, veterans. We're talking like in their upper 30s and 40s.
Okay.
And my main goal for them is just longevity and wellness in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And just keeping them healthy so that they can actually train in their skills work. And a lot of those guys are super skillful anyways, that doing general physical work is going to enhance their skills. So, and it allows them to stay. The longer you stay in the sport, the better you can be. And the longer you stay, as long as you stay healthy, the better you can be. So that's really what it comes down to. But I think, as far as like the general blocks, like it would be like a 4 to 6 week off camp, and then 8 weeks out, then we start our in camp.
Okay. You also bring up a very interesting point, because when I was with the DOD at Fort Knox and Fort Bliss, where they're working with selection or special operators, that whole area, like when they're just prepping to go down range, they don't know when it's going to happen. Same thing in a fight. Like you don't know when you're going to be put on a card. That population, and I'm going to make a guess and a gander, correct me if I'm wrong, in your population, fighting population, that they are so incredibly anteriorly dominant, more than any other sport or athlete I've ever seen in my life. It's on because everything they're doing is that they're throwing, they're reaching, they're crunching down, they're cracking down, and there's nothing behind them, which, I mean, outside of never doing any proper weight training, like what is that something you habitually see when you have like law enforcement officers come to you, when you have fighters come to you? Like, are they just more so than a football player, more so than a track athlete, more so than any other type of sport?
Yeah, I would say that it depends on the background. Wrestlers tend to have stronger posterior chains, like with the wrestler background, because I think now strength and conditioning coaches in the collegiate setting are actually getting smarter. And they're understanding like posterior chain is actually.
We'll edit that out. Don't worry.
I mean, they're getting smarter. I mean, honestly, like there's a lot more information out there now about that.
Yes.
So it's like, all right, posterior chain, it definitely helps. Jiu-jitsu guys, Muay Thai fighters, even boxers, they're very anteriorly dominant. And then as far as like getting them to where they need to be from a biomechanics standpoint, we want them to understand how to move in several different planes of motion, in several different velocities. So like I will work the basic patterns. I'll work, the squat, hinge, push, pull, all of that, twist, everything. But then we'll start to look at, all right, where they are deficient in. Are they anteriorly compressed? Are they posteriorly compressed? And a lot of times, like you said, they are anteriorly compressed. So most of the stuff that we do is posteriorly dominant, but we still want to maintain some of that anterior strength.
Right.
So a lot of the main lifts or our testers are going to be an anterior dominant lift, right? And then our accessories, our supplemental lifts may go posterior, just so that we can balance out the body to a degree. I hate that word, balance out, but you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just keep them safe. And alongside with that, like kyphotic posture, everybody primarily has some, inkling of it. Like just being in general, like being right here, let's being on a computer, like we're always, we're folded forward.
Right.
Looking at upper back strength, looking at hamstring strength, glute strength, and then also working range of motion in each joint capsule is important. So like I found out when I was working with the rest of the guys, like they're strong. Most of them are pretty strong and strong relative for the weight class or just for the sport itself. They have a good ability to produce force fast. So powerful, you're knocking guys out, you're obviously powerful, right? Or there's something there as far as like how your technique is. But mobility was lacking. So I couldn't get them in positions half the time to do certain exercises. So our exercise pool was very limited. And so my goal was to increase the range of motion, the active and range control of each joint capsule so that I could do more stuff with them and vary the exercises so that in any position we're going to be strong in. And then when I started doing more mobility training, and I'm just saying, whether it be controlled articular rotations, a lot of FRC stuff, I would find that they're able to get in positions and understand how strong they can be in those positions. especially in grappling and everything else, because, and that was the feedback I was getting. So it was, it may have been anecdotal in a sense, but it was basic feedback. It was real-time feedback that I got from my guys.
Right.
You know, so I was like, okay, there's something to this. And then I was able to like, all right, now they couldn't do a basic good morning without rounding the upper back. Now they can get into a good morning, and then we can work the good morning, as opposed to like, oh, this is looking shitty. You know, so I didn't want to, if it didn't look right, we got out of it. And I would limit the range of motion until we got there. So like it would be pin pulls or something like that until they can get that thoracic extension enough to do the full range of motion, right? And some of the times it may not be called to do that full range of motion. And like a lot of times when we get in closer to fights, I limit the range of motion, or I'll go into, you know, like some type of quasi-isometric or isometric movement, just to get the force production. And then from there, I'll go into some type of contrast, where it'd be a dynamic effort work.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that was what my finding was. And that was the thing that I hit upon first. I did a podcast with Joe DeFranco way back, and he was like, this was right when I was starting to really do this a lot. And he was like, what's
work with fighters?
Working with fighters.
Okay.
Yeah. Working with fighters, doing this a lot. I'm talking about mobility training though.
Oh, okay.
Transition, like, you know, a lot. Yeah, obviously I want to get them stronger. I want to get them more explosive endurance, but mobility, I was like really big into it because I was seeing the benefits of it with the elite guys that already had power, that already had strength, already had a little bit of like, you know, general fitness in sense. And I'm like, all right, what's going to be the X factor for these people? And it was that. And so I was explaining this to him, and he was like, yeah, that makes so much sense, because he was training a lot of the older NFL guys. So there's a similarity there with the elite guys and also the veterans. So
yeah, I mean, you talk about elite guys, whether you talk about like sports or operators, like they're there. You know, obviously they're there because they're the elite. They're on pay-per-view already. So it's really just comes down to, and you know, chime in on this if you don't agree, but it's almost like a refinement process at that level. And I think, you know, for myself, my coaching, the last 3 years, it's been a real big push on like mobility, especially T-spine mobility. I mean, I was getting into it before I joined the DoD, and then when I got into the DoD, I realized, like, you know, if they're using their hips as a swivel, as a turret, and you're doing a CQB through a house, well, you know, every male wants another 3 inches. You know, let's be honest here, everyone does. So when they move that rifle and they can contort another 3 inches while they're still moving, you just saved a life. Yeah. You know, I mean, and in your case, like, you just knocked someone out clean, cold. You just reached around, you put them in a headlock. Like, it's a very interesting perplexion, because a lot of coaches, like in my mind, when I'm dealing with like an operator or like the very few fighters I've ever worked with, it has been a mobility thing. It's like majority of them, it's like, dude, 40 to 50% of what we're doing is mobility, to put them in the position, like you're saying, put them in positions. Yeah,
it optimizes the kinematic sequence, you know, as far as like how they move inside the cage in real time for a sport specific. So if I can get them get their general mobility down, then when they go do their sport specific skill work or their technique in sports, it's a lot more efficient. And they understand now, like, they're like, I understand why my body moves like this, and I know what muscles need to turn on for that joint to incorporate in that whatever muscle that crosses that joint, I know how to actually turn it on to make that movement happen.
Right.
I've been working with a lot of SWAT guys recently too as well. And that was one thing when I did the initial assessment, was like, they all had dysfunction. They all had compensatory strategies built in based upon just movement in general. And also, these guys are always on, right? The stress level for these guys is
I mean, they get a call and they go. So
the training that I do with them right now, at least for the next 4 to 6 weeks, is all building, you know, laying the foundation, right? And laying the foundation of just proper movement strategies to allow them to feel better, to do as well, and also do their job effectively and efficiently.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, how much pelvic distress are SWAT guys in from all that gear they're carrying on their hips?
As far as what I've seen is, you know, lack of external internal rotation.
Okay.
Low back issues.
Yeah.
That's going to come from, you know, again, the same concept. I think also is they are carrying a lot of load, and also in the front of their body.
Yeah. So, that carrier. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like, and this is very new to me. So like, I'm still learning that process, but they're not too far off from fighters. Like a lot of the stuff that they go through.
Yeah.
The gear that they carry is bulky. These guys actually, their gear is actually pretty good. They got some new gear. So I'm like, and I'm actually going to get in the gear at some point.
Actually run it and see what it feels like. 100%.
Want to check it out.
Yeah.
A lot of my guys are jiu-jitsu guys. So they're high level jiu-jitsu guys that are in the squad. So like
nice.
one guy I have is a multiple time world champion black belt, and he's also a SWAT commander. So I'm like,
awesome. That's so great.
He's a straight badass. So I'm like, so I'm like, so years of jiu-jitsu, and then you couple that with all the gear that they're wearing, and then they're always in there. There's so much dysfunction going on as far as like movement strategy. So like we just try to get them out of that position as much as possible so that they can gain more range. They can do the things that they need to do, and be out of pain. That's the one thing is when you're looking at these guys, they're gonna succeed because they have to. It's life or death, you know. So it's allowing them to do their job at a comfortable manner, and I mean by comfortable as in not being in body pain, right? It's not ever going to be comfortable, but
no.
As far as like
constant lower back pain, shoulder pain, like let's eliminate that.
Exactly. So that's pretty much what I'm doing now, and I got them on the reverse hyper. I got them doing some belt squat marching and things like that, but also those mobility drills are very important, like in-range hovers and control articular rotations and things like that, which have helped because it's teaching them to understand how to move their body in space and disassociate joint by joint, right? So knowing, all right, I got to move my ankle. I'm only moving my ankle. I'm not moving my knee with my hip and everything else. I'm isolating. And then, so I always say, like, I like to isolate before I integrate. And so with that, I'll take that. And a lot of it is coming down even from the feet. So I do a lot of footwork. I think people think I got a foot fetish or something on Instagram, but like,
it all starts with the feet, man. It's your base.
And they're stuck in those boots and those shoes, and like, you know, one, their feet are crunched together, right? Because they have that narrow toe box and they just lack big toe flexion. And so with that, when they go to propel, or, you know, when they go to toe off, they don't have that range of motion. So they dip into the inside of the knee, and that causes knee issues. That causes external rotation of the hip, you know, tightness in the adductors, so on and so forth. So I'm like, let's figure that out. Let's start from the basic support system and then work our way up, and also tie that into the core of the trunk. Proper breathing patterns too are a key factor for us. So I'm teaching them how to diaphragmatically breathe now, which a lot of them don't. They're upper chest breathers. So we do a lot of nasal breathing work. That's another thing that's definitely helped my fighters too, as well as learning how to breathe properly, because a lot of them lack the ability to breathe diaphragmatically. They have respiratory issues in general, just from biomechanics. So, you know, improper biomechanics, postural issues. Improving posture and improving on their ability to breathe nasally, like in through the nose, maybe out through the mouth, depending on how intense the situation is. But most of it is nasal only, which will, one, obviously bring down the stress and get them into a parasympathetic state to allow them to still think cognitively and in a clearer manner. And then also it's increasing their energy output. So they're staying efficient.
And curiosity wise, when I was at Knox, gentleman I worked for, and then when I took over there, we were both very big on like nasal breathing, like down deep in the stomach. Once the soldiers and the operators that we were working with got a hold of that, even whether we're talking about kit, pistol, long gun, rifle, they all came back and they were like, I can hit tighter clusters on a more regular basis. Have they gone to the range yet? Have they mastered that enough to go to the range and like practice it on the range? Because I'll tell you right now, they're going to hit tighter clusters.
That's good to know. No, I haven't tested it. Like I've had them do basic breath holds, like 10 to 15 second breath holds. I use a lot of Buteyko method or oxygen advantage work, and then we'll do some type of Wim Hof breathing in the beginning. But yeah, like as far as their runs go, they know that they can push out a little bit more. They see themselves actually increasing their distances. So, which is important. I think what ends up happening is that these guys are they're intense, right? So they want to go harder. They want to go longer. They want to go faster. They're just like fighters, right? From a mentality standpoint. So like when they go and I say, okay, go do a run, they're like, all right, I'm going to do 7 miles, right? Or 8 miles. A lot of these guys are also ex-military. So they're used to running, but they're also used to pushing the pace, right? So they're not pushing their aerobic capacity, they're dipping into those other energy systems. And then from there, you're not getting the stimulus to increase your aerobic capacity. So to keep them honest, I keep them nasal breathing only throughout their long distance runs. So they'll get more of a distance, they'll get more distance. Obviously, they're going to cover less, they're going to cover a lot of distance, but in more time. But the goal is they're never sucking wind. They're never like out dying, right?
Right.
They feel like they can do more because of the fact that they're staying calm. And so there might be there might be that transfer from when they're actually on the range. And I am really looking forward to seeing how that does transfer.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
You mentioned all those guys. The one gentleman is like a 3-time black belt. He's like a world champion.
Yeah, world champion.
Like,
yeah.
okay. Talking about jujitsu, what do you have any go-tos when it comes to shoulder and elbow strength, flexibility, mobility in terms to withstand that beating? Because I mean, a lot of jujitsu is joint manipulation.
Yeah.
So I mean, what do you like for those two joints or shoulder joint in particular to strengthen for that sport, that realm?
Well, like I said, I constantly do controlled articular rotations. So like our morning routines, just flossing out the joint, getting into these end ranges, and then like things like banded dislocates, banded pull aparts, protraction, retraction drills. I'll do a lot of like hanging, like scap pull-ups, scap push-ups, things like that, just to understand how that shoulder should rotate and also move throughout, the scapula should move throughout the rib cage. I'll find out where they're stuck at. So we'll use an assessment to see, all right, where their range is limited. And then I'll work in that range. So we'll find out what's the weakest position. And then I'll start to go quasi-isometric or even load that position safely, obviously without compensation, and start to develop more strength in those ranges. And then over time, they develop more range. So it's, again, increasing the capacity of that joint with isometric movements, in all actuality. As far as like keeping the joints safe or, just, you got to be good. Just don't get caught in dumb shit.
Right.
No, I still like the high rep stuff with the bands, what Louis said, I still do a lot of that just to get blood flow. As far as like supplementation, glutamine, glucosamine, I do a lot right now. I'm doing, and I don't know if this has any benefit, but I do fish oils, omega-3s, all that good stuff too as well. And then as far as just for the soft tissue in itself, collagen protein. So we'll do a lot of collagen there too as well. And either in a form of bone broth or just in a powdered form, something that I'll take consistently for the joints, soft tissue.
Almost an aside, but do you do buy into the bone broth thing that it helps? Like I've done it for a month. I gotta be honest, I didn't feel any digestive difference or any joint difference at all. And because I'm weird, so I don't know. I'm Nordic, so it could be. I don't know.
I like that too. You're Nordic. I like it. That's dope.
You can use that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, in all actuality, there are some studies that prove its efficacy, but I think it really is dependent upon the individual too as well. I'm not a big fan of ice. I'm not a big fan of a lot of things, but
ice, really?
I mean, it depends on what it is. Like if it's I love the cold plunges. I love that.
Oh, so that ice bath. That was what I was thinking of. Yeah.
I love cold plunges. But
hell yeah.
Ice on an acute injury, I don't really buy into that too much. And there's been a lot of evidence that's proven it's not as good as heat actually. So I mean, you can go back and forth and the studies are conflicting, but at the end of the day, like I'm just trying to figure out what's best for my athletes and what's best for me. And if they say if it works and if it's a placebo effect, and then all right, whatever the case. But at the end of the day, we're looking to improve. We're looking to increase their ability to keep going. And if it does help them from a mental standpoint, then I'll take it.
Dude, that's a great. I was gonna say to you before you brought that last little bit up. Like, dude, the mind's the driver.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what everyone says. Like, the mind's the driver. The body's not a machine. As much as we want it to be, it's an organism. And the mind's a driver, man. If they believe it actually is helping them and it gives up, do it. If you think sleeping on a waterbed is going to help you, you know what? You just do it. You sleep on that waterbed.
I mean, as long as it's not hurting them more. Like, it's fine. You know what I mean? Like this is when I came to that conclusion, especially working with athletes just for such a long time. is that like they're creatures of habit. So like
Yeah.
if I take away that habit, it negatively affects them even more, even if it's something that really they're wasting their time on. In their mind, they think it's good for them. So it affects them positively. If I take it away from them, it affects them negatively. So like there was an instance where I didn't want, and I'll just say it because this is kind of, I think it's public knowledge by this point,
Fair.
but Dustin, Dustin wanted to run all the time. Like he loved to run, but his hips, like he had to have surgery on his hips.
Yeah.
And I was like, bro, I don't think it's a good idea. Like I'm like, honestly, like I'm telling you right now, you shouldn't run on a hard surface. You should actually try to like swim. He's like, fuck that. I don't hate swimming. He's like, I want to run. I love running because it clears my mind. It helps me out mentally. So I go, I'm like, all right, so we have to like combat that with things that are going to make him better or feel better afterwards. But if I pulled that away from him, it would be 10 times worse. You see what I'm saying? So we have to deal with these types of things in a certain way as a coach. That's why a coach is so much more than just a programmer or, even like a sports science guy. It's there's more to it. There's more psychology involved in actually being a coach, especially in a sport that's combative like that, because they have to get in there and they put their lives on the line, whether that be from a tactical standpoint or from, an MMA standpoint.
Yeah. How did you work around that? Because I've, obviously worked with like operators and then working with, albeit like the top end, like CrossFit, like individuals going to the games, and they have to run. They have to do it. They just have to. They refuse to not do it. And when they talk about, I'll have you do sprints. No, I got to do long distance. Have you do assault bike? No, got to do long distance. Have you swim? No, got to do long distance running.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't do it, like you said, like they just start to lose it.
Yep.
I have my ways of working around it. How did you work around that with Dustin? Do you remember?
I mean, a lot of times we would just limit the times he would go out. It went from doing 4 or 5 day a week runs to like 2, which was way better, and then we would switch it up. I would have him, at least he'd level with me. Instead of going on the hard surface, he'd run on the grass. So like these little things there, and or not the grass, go on a rubber track, right? So those hard surfaces, pounding on the hard surface. And then I would say, all right, nasal breathe only, right? So then it would kind of limit his ability to do more output, as far as like, I don't want to say output because he did longer distances, but he would get bored because he wasn't
really
pushing.
Pulling and like pushing the pace, like yeah.
So he got bored at that point. I was like, just do 3 miles, just do 3, nasal breathing only. And because he couldn't push it, we still got the volume in that we wanted, that I needed, but he didn't push it to a level where he was sprinting for 3 minutes or for 3 miles, right? Which would cause an even more issue. Yeah. So that, and then we would do things like, biking, or he didn't like to swim. That was one thing he just said no about, but biking was okay. And then doing conditioning inside the weight room, he loved to do too as well, because he just loves to feel a push. That was one thing that, the prowler was another major one that we worked with, and we still do to this day. And then also he does like to do sport specific movements. And I hate to say that because it gets bastardized. Yeah. But he likes to do things that he knows that are going to have high transfer, but he doesn't like to simulate. Does that make sense? So like he likes to throw med ball, like he'll throw med ball throws and simulate an overhand, but he's not going to like put gloves on and a mouthpiece. He don't like to do that. And there's some guys that do like to do that, and there's some that don't. And so, all right, fine. I got a young kid that's actually fighting today. For Eagle FC, and he loves simulation. Like he loves, like, all right, we're gonna put the gloves on, put the mouthpiece in, we'll simulate the whole thing. I'll grapple with you, all of that.
Let's have fun. Oh yeah.
Let's have fun. And then he'll push the prowler at the same time. He'll push the prowler, we'll pummel, we'll grapple, get out of bottom, control, whatever. He likes that. Some of them don't. And so you just got to know how to program effectively for that athlete, and then that's going to help with buy-in. That's going to help with getting the stimulus that's necessary for that individual. And they trust you too. So like for me, it does help that I had time in the game. Like I actually fought. That does actually help when you relay over information to an athlete, especially in a sport specific realm. They're like, okay, I got it, And then you throw in understanding of biomechanics, and then relaying over that information to them in an appropriate manner for them to understand, that helps also. So if you're looking to actually gain buy-in with an athlete, make sure that you can articulate your words appropriately to where it sounds and it is high level, but not high level enough to where it's going over their head.
Yeah. It's great that you bring up buy-in, because in the military, that's huge, because you're going on a base as a civilian contractor.
Yeah.
And for me, signing up to be in the US military is crazy. But they look at what I'm doing, and to them, putting 500 pounds in their back to do some triples is like, why would I want to do that? That's just dumb.
Yeah.
But I met so many coaches in that project that would try to, obviously we all never been, like you've been, you fought, and then you work with fighters. We've never been in the military, but now we're working with men and women in the military that would try to over the top adapt to that and try to use every bit of slang and every bit of knowledge they could find off the internet, and it came across as very disingenuous.
Yeah.
So I think you agree. There's a fine line between
That's
like
very true.
buy-in and being yourself.
Yeah.
Like you have to be yourself, like
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
And this makes a lot of sense, and that's why I didn't want to get it taken out of context.
Yeah.
So like with my guys, with the SWAT, with the military guys that I'm continuing to work with, they respect me in what I've already done. They respect me in what I do with the guys that they look at as like, the fighters, the MMA guys, the boxers, the judokas, whatever. And they're like, we know you know what you're doing.
Right.
Hands down, right? We know when it comes down to this inside the weight room or wherever, when it comes to physical preparation, you know what you're doing. When I got buy-in for those individuals, it was wanting to learn their world, like asking them questions so that I can relay over information to them on why that's actually happening from my standpoint.
Yes.
So like I actually went in to the SWAT training grounds, and they were showing me breaching, and they were showing me how they maneuver. And I was like, show that again. All right, go back again. Let me see where your feet are. Okay. And they're like, and then I'm telling them, breaking it down, like again, from that kinematic sequence of how they breach. And I'm like, I would probably do it like this. And then I would take it in terms of what I know from like a stance perspective. I was like, maybe you should drop level. And they're like, you know what? That makes total sense. And so with that helped the whole situation. That helped like them buying into what I had to offer. And they already bought in, but then when I took the initiative to actually go see how they train, go see their movements in real time, and then look at how they're moving, because I look at that first and foremost. Like I'm looking at, all right, why are you putting, tension on this side? Where is your center of mass as you go to maneuver through this plane of motion? And then from there, I'm like, is that the most efficient way possible? And if it is, I'll leave it alone, and then we'll work to enhance that. If it's not, maybe there's something that I can give you to adapt to that. I do that with everybody. I do that with the jiu-jitsu practitioners. I do that with the judokas, because I'm looking at biomechanics. So first and foremost, from a general perspective, and then I'm going to transfer that over into whatever they're doing. So yeah, with that being said, I'm not saying that for me, I'm not saying that you have to be a fighter to train fighters. I'm not saying that at all.
No.
I'm saying for me personally, it helped me in the beginning, especially coming into a world where these guys were already high level. But on the flip side to that, if you stay focused on wanting to learn, right, and having that white belt mentality for their particular world, and showing them that you can dictate it and you can produce what you need to produce with the stuff that that transfers over to what their world is called upon doing, then they're going to be like, all right, perfect. This is the guy we need, or this is the girl we need. Yeah.
Total brown nosing moment here. I could not agree anymore with anything you just said. I'm seriously, no, I really can't, because in my previous occupation, when I would go out to the field with those men and women, because I have no idea what's going on. Like, here, wear this kit carrier, put this helmet on. Here's an M4, give you some military grade ammunition. That'll be fun. We'll go out. They actually put me through what they're doing, and then I actually get to watch them do it. Next time I see them in the weight room, there's you can relate directly. This is why we're doing this. Yep. This is why we're doing this rotation. Because when you're clearing that house and you need to whip around, this is going to make you that much more efficient. And they see it and they do it. And now they understand, like, oh, not only we've told to respect you, but you've gone to us who are technically lower level than you, and you've watched us and you've talked to us and you know what we're going through, and you can actually relate it and you remember it, and then you actually relate it to us in the weight room in your world. 110%. Like, you get immediate ultra uber buy-in.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's fun. It's fun. I mean, was it fun to go to SWAT team and do that?
absolutely.
Wasn't it fun? It was very fun. Yeah.
It's different, it's a different type of deal, but it's still the same intensity. It's similar to going into an MMA gym and watching them spar. Like, they're going and doing their thing, and actually at the range and how they train. It's like, all right, cool. And then you put yourself in it, you get the gear on, and you start to do all the movements and all the drills. And then you're like, okay, I get it now. I know how this feels. And they are like, oh, he's getting it now. He knows how it feels. And now I'm ready to work with him. So
right.
Yeah, definitely.
So what does a week look like for guys training? Like, just generic fighter / SWAT officer, like, just give a general malaise of what a training week looks like in an off-season-esque type, as much as it can be an off-season.
Well, with MMA, they're always training. So they'll have like certain days where they're doing either wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and sparring and grappling, kind of all mixed up throughout the day. I try to consolidate the stresses. So like, if they're having a hard sparring day, I try to do some weight training after the hard sparring day, just so that the next day they can rest, they can recover, go in there, maybe do some drilling, but that's more of a recovery day. For the most part, like, these guys are always going to train hard, because if they're even off camp, they're going to help their teammates get ready for a fight. So they're always 90% going, right? Yeah. And then as far as like our weight training, that's going to be either Tuesdays and Fridays or Tuesdays and Thursdays, depending on if they're off camp, in camp. If they're in camp, we'll go Tuesday, Friday, because we want that 72 hours, because we are going to be doing, dynamic and max effort work. On Saturdays, we usually do like a team training where we'll take them to either the stadium stairs, the beach, or something like that. We'll get them out of the gym and get them going into like a team atmosphere, have them do like bridge runs. We don't have hills here, so we do like stadium runs at FAU, or we'll go up the bridge in like I-95 or something like that, just for incline. It's a good push. It's a good gauge of where they're at from an endurance standpoint. We use that as a baseline testing too as well. They'll do at least one day a week of cognitive conditioning, where they're working like depth perception, they're working memory, they're working hand-eye coordination drills, things like that. And then recovery throughout the weeks. If they're in camp, they're going to hit an ice bath directly after. If they're off camp, they're going to wait a little bit. They'll probably do that on the day after, so they can maintain that stimulus of either strength or hypertrophy. As far as the SWAT guys, man, it's Mondays and Fridays, because that's pretty much the only time I could get them, and I get them early in the morning. Otherwise,
how early?
I mean, it's not super early, but it's like 6 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and those are the times that they have, off in the morning, and then they go in for work in the afternoon. So a lot of those guys will go from strength and conditioning to jiu-jitsu. So they'll go with me, and then they'll go right into a jiu-jitsu class at like 9 a.m. and then they'll go on shift, all the way through. So, and then Wednesday they have team training. So then I'll go out there, watch them do their team training, which is like breaching and stuff like that. And that's been fun when I can. Like, my days are so packed, it's crazy. Because not only that, I work with the fighters. I also work with some celebrities, and then I have to do all my other stuff from my digital side.
Oh, rock on. Do you do all the digital stuff yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, God bless.
Yeah.
God bless. I know the struggle. I know the struggle.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, I have a team. I have a good team that does like my audio and my video, but like when it comes down to organizing, when it comes down to editing, how I edit or how I want it edited, all of that. We have a full production studio too in the gym.
Oh,
so
rock on. Okay.
My podcast room in there, and then I'll have when I do like tutorial videos or something like that, I usually right there in the gym.
Okay. Okay. So earlier you mentioned about the core, like foundational lifts way earlier, like 20, 30 minutes ago. For a fighter, what are your big three lifts, like tester lifts, if you had to say?
Yeah, I get this a lot. I get this a lot. If I were to go back, I would say some type of, for a pressing motion, is going to be a floor press. And I'll keep it very simple. So a floor press would be my go-to.
All right.
For a squat motion, it'll be probably a Zercher squat. primarily, or front squat, depending if they have the dexterity.
Okay.
And then a deadlift will be a sumo or a trap bar.
Okay.
So either
Is
one of
that
those.
again depending on position, ability to get in
Yeah.
that sumo position? Okay.
Depending on position, also like, yeah, mobility, and then also what do I want to enhance, right? So if it's sumo, I want hip dexterity. I want them to be able to have that lateral force displacement.
Yeah.
For trap bar, obviously it's more midline of the body, so that's kind of keeps them safer. There's more emphasis placed upon even the upper back and maintaining stiffness in the lats, and then also leg drive. So I use that for leg drive more so than anything. But a lot of these guys have leg drive; they just lack the hip dexterity. So sumo would be good. I also do a lot of box sumo.
Okay.
One, to get them to understand how to pull back on the bar, because a lot of them kick their knees forward, the knees go over the bar, stuff like that. Sitting back into their hamstrings, and being comfortable sitting back into that pocket. We'll do like hovers. So I'll have them hover the bar for about 2 or 3 seconds and then have them explode. So we'll go pause deadlifts and stuff like that in that mid range with the sumo pull. As far as supplemental, obviously wide stance, close stance, good mornings. We use different bars, you know how it goes. Camber bar, Duffalo. We use a lot of the SSB, so the safety squat bar. That's our go-to because of the shoulders, and a lot of these guys can't even put the bar on their back. Most of them. Zercher, I have had them go to a 1 rep, but it kills their elbows a lot of times.
Oh yeah.
So it will have like elbow sleeves on or something like that, or towels wrapped around the bar, or we use a safety squat bar too as well with the padding. If we have a long enough safety squat bar, or an axle bar with a wider circumference, so it's not digging into the elbow.
Yeah. So you mentioned floor press, Zercher squat or front squat, depending on dexterity, and then sumo or trap bar.
Yeah.
Now, 5 years ago, was that the same, or were they different? How did this devolve this for me? You've evolved to that, but devolved 5 years.
Yeah, I would say a lot more box squatting in the beginning. Just because I wanted them to understand how to absorb and reproduce force, from that static overcome a dynamic in that low box position. So we'd go, but the problem was that they would crash on the box a lot of the times. And I would teach them in a lot of times, we taught them very well. It wasn't that, but it was a lot of compression on the spine that I wanted to reduce.
Yeah.
Just because of training all the time. So I got away from that. And this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I got away from that. It wasn't even 5.
Okay.
If they do have the ability to produce that force, they have the understanding of intra-abdominal pressure, and they can control that squat motion all the way down, sit back into the hips, unlock, and then go.
Yeah.
Then I'd say, okay, that's fine. But then again, even me, like I have pinched nerves, and I have C5, C6, C7 are all compressed and herniated from just load, right? Either that, or I don't know. It could have been from football, and then it just kind of went.
Yeah.
But with me, it's different. Obviously, I'm squatting 500-600 pounds. These guys are hitting maybe 3s and 4s at the most, and I got away from it more so than anything. And then also I got away from a lot of conventional deadlifts from the floor. I just couldn't get into the position anymore. So like it's either going to be some type of pin pull, it's going to be a sumo, like I said, or it'll be just something off of blocks, something that keeps them in that position, or an RDL even, something like that.
Dude, I love an RDL, and I don't know why those aren't more widely used for athletes in general. I would even go so far as to say I've used it for athletes as a primary.
Yeah.
Like it's as actual.
I use it now to teach the deadlift. Like I start them at the top.
Okay, so you work your way down,
Work my way down.
Okay.
Yeah. Teach them the kinematic sequence of hip hinge and then bending the knees slightly, keeping the back nice and tight. That's helped out a lot actually, because a lot of these guys just fold straight over. So I use dumbbells more than anything in the beginning. and I'll put hands on the side of them so that they can feel their lats engage.
Yeah.
And then come down. And then once we get to that position, then I can start to put them, put a bar in their hands and show them that proper thoracic extension to keep that lat engagement, and then come down. And I'll cue like something like, crush your armpits or squeeze a bar, pull the bar apart, stuff like that. But most of it is going to start with the dumbbells and then go into, because I also do a lot of kettlebell swings. So we got a lot of kettlebell stuff now because of that, like that relax, contract motion. So swinging, we do a lot with like kettlebell, windmills, arm bars, even just basic walks. I love those. I love that for two reasons. One, the core control component, the stability component, and then that, the contract, relax component too as well. And the dexterity of a kettlebell, you could do a lot.
Yeah, you are talking about actual Russian design kettlebells, not the Donnie Thompson fat bells.
No. Real
real kettlebells.
Like, I don't do a lot of the other stuff. I'm more Russian based.
Okay, fair. When you were talking about box squat, and I agree when it comes to, like, especially an athlete, like, you can teach them all you want, but eventually they're going to drop on that box from an inch out, and you're going to get compression. That's why in collegiate athletics, it's not a very widely used device. I've posed this out to a lot of coaches in the last like 5 years. Like, I remember 5 years ago, I would have told you, if you'd asked me that question, I would have told you, you need to squat, bench, and deadlift. And then about 4 years ago, I realized a point where, in my opinion, what I've seen, and completely nerd out on this with me and tell me how wrong I am on this. If you are going to run, if you were doing, a typical Westside split, or you're just doing like a heavy lower and then like a speed power lower, however you want to define it. I'm actually more pro to the point now with that speed dynamic lower. I will use a box because it's more controllable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I will have them. Yeah, I will have them wide. So you are getting that lateral like rip displacement. You're teaching them all that motion. But when it comes to like the heavy, like lower, if we're doing a squat type of motion, I'll have them do a split squat, like a loaded split squat. I do not care how much they can, because they're not a weight room warrior. I do not care. They're not going to powerlifting competition. I don't care. But unilateral. And that way we can go from, being wide to being, narrow. You can Bulgarian it, safety it, whatever. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, you're right. And I left that out. I actually went more towards that too as well with the SSB. So they'll do, more of a split stance. I don't do any like Bulgarian style, heavy loaded. Obviously I'll do it for more accessory work with dumbbells. But yeah, for the most part, or it could be with dumbbells too as well with the split stance. Yeah. We've done that too. I've done a bunch of different things. And I think that also plays a big role because that you got a stability component to that too, with the split stance. It's not as bad as like a Bulgarian split squat, but you're still on one leg in a sense, right? And we want to key that. I'll also do it in the bell squat too as well. So forgot to mention that. So
that's a whole other world we can talk about now.
Actually, if I only had the bell squat and reverse hyper and a prowler, You'd
be set. You'd be ready to go. Yeah.
But yeah, like we'll do that in the bell squat. I'll have them either split stance or I'll go wide stance on the bell squat for either submax or maximum effort work. Even with a variable of like, this distribution of load on the hips more than anything, the tension gradient. Yeah. One, it's keeping them less at risk of injury, especially through the spine, right? And I want them to actually feel how it feels to load and push and create force from the legs and the hips, as opposed to everything else having to go along. Right. So I try to minimize the skill that you have to acquire from a barbell lift, so that they can produce as much force as humanly possible with a very simple, basic movement pattern.
Okay. So when you use you have an actual, like, when we say belt squat, you have like a ATP?
Yeah, I have ATP.
Okay. All right. So good. Same as my facility. So when you're having to do a box squat on that or free squat, are you more of a fan of straight weight on the carriage, straight band on the carriage, or is there I see the smile. Yeah, this is going. Do you have a base band and then you stack the weight?
I do have a base band.
Yeah, man.
I either double it or I'll single it or double it, and it'll depend on like, it obviously depends on the ability of the athlete, right? Yeah. But yeah, that band don't come off that.
No, it's just stuck on there. It's like you peel it off, it's kind of like sticking.
Yeah,
It's the same
definitely.
here. Like, I don't know, like I've told athletes before, like once you go banned, you don't go back. You
Yeah,
don't. You just
yeah.
don't.
Especially if they're explosive, right? So like
Right.
driving through, like I felt even with me, like that cable would even like, it would lag
You get a little,
and would
yeah.
catch. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, let me go ahead and throw this band on there just for that simple fact. And I remember going to Westside
Mhm.
and I think there was a monster band on the ATP, right? At all times.
Yeah. Well,
Something like that.
were you there when we had the black ones, the dynamic ones, or was it that one red one?
I think it was a one red one.
Okay,
It was
that
wrapped
was, it
around
was
it.
like
It
7 years.
was,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it was a blue
yeah,
one. I
yeah,
just
yeah,
stayed there. Lou just put
yeah.
it on there,
Stayed
just
there.
laid there.
And I would shadow in it,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
turned around, he's like, he goes, yeah, that's pretty good. I was like, that shit is heavy as it was
I
heavy as
know.
hell,
I
man. I was
know.
like, there was like 45s like welded onto it or whatever, or like
Mhm.
hundreds welded on,
Well, that
something
was
like
the
that. It
reverse
was,
hyper. Yeah.
yeah, oh no, but there was still weight on that on the ATP as
Oh
well.
yeah.
So
No,
there's
no. The
weight and
band was on
bands
the
on them.
outside of the hundos. Yeah, I know what you're
Yes,
talking about. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember that now.
yeah.
That was a long time ago. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I've always remembered that one, and I was just like, you know what, man, just keep this on here. And my guys know it too. Like my coaches, they know not to take that band off. So
Mm-hmm.
and we'll do. And that's another thing. Like for conditioning, I'll have them shadow pummel, 3 5 minute rounds, something like that. I actually had Kevin Lee do it the other day for his knee, and we just basically just march for 3 minutes, 3 3 minute rounds. He hates it, but he feels his hips. He knows that it's working. And as a tester, I'll even use that sometimes as a tester to see where they're at. Like if you can march and pummel in there for 5 minutes with an X amount of load, then I can, all right, now I know that you have some endurance in your legs and your hips, you can
Right.
withstand that. So I always test everything, but from a main lift perspective, yeah, those are going to be the main ones. I do like that split squat though. Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Mhm.
No, that's been the biggest game changer. And almost every coach I've talked to, collegiate, professional, they've
Mhm.
all said that. Like last 5 years, like they've not completely gotten rid of a bilateral squat for like the
Mhm.
speed power development, but for their heavy stuff, why?
Yeah,
Just
no,
why?
for
If
sure.
it's an athlete, like why?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, no, and I like it too. They feel it more so than anything.
Mhm.
And again, like you can load it, but you ain't gonna load it like maximally with two, the same as 2 feet.
Right.
So
Right.
you're taking stress off the body in a sense, but you're still getting that adaptation of force. You're getting that stimulus of creating that force as much as possible with that particular load in single leg. So there's no asymmetry built in,
Mhm.
which is important, especially for the guys that I'm working with, because we're always bladed. So there's always that back foot's always a little bit stronger. So if I can get them both in that similar range, now they have the ability to get in and out of the pocket a little bit more efficiently, as opposed to just depending upon their stronger side.
Right.
You know?
Do you ever, when you're multiple people have different feelings when they do this, but when you do single leg work, when you do it yourself, not your athletes, do you feel that more in your that working legs glute?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. I tore my ACL in jiu-jitsu, my right knee in
Mhm.
jiu-jitsu 2 years ago. And
Okay.
so for the longest, it was, I get what you're saying though, because
Yeah.
you sit into the hip a little bit more.
Mhm.
Now though, it's hard to judge, because for the longest time, I wouldn't get a quad pump on my right side because of the atrophy built in
Yeah.
from the ACL, and then obviously getting the surgery on it. So my right side would be able to go a little bit longer, and I would call upon other muscles that weren't involving the glute or weren't involving the quadricep muscles,
Mhm.
and more so involving the glute, the adductors, right, and the hamstrings in a sense, to get up off of that like single leg. Let's just say a rear foot elevator or a Bulgarian split squat.
Okay.
I would call upon that, and then when my left leg, with the one that didn't have the ACL, that thing would blow up so fast because I was utilizing oxygen so more efficiently. So
Mhm.
like blood would be rushed there, and I would get more of a nitric oxide boost in
Okay.
that leg. So I wouldn't be able to hit more than 10 to 12 with the one that was obviously essentially had to get surgery on. I would do 15 easily. The
Yeah.
only thing that would die out, it would be like a nervous system failure. But at the end of the day, like I was able to still get as many reps as I could. And I felt it more so in the surrounding tissue just because of the injury. Now though, I think that I'm pretty evenly stacked just because I know how to put my body in a position.
Mhm.
But I can see where that's coming from, because the glute is obviously going to be a stronger muscle to to make sure the muscle or make sure the movement goes.
Yeah, I mean, every athlete I put in that position, well, not every, I'll say 9 out of 10, they all say, wow, my ass feels like it's gonna rip off of my pelvis. I'm like, well, great.
Yeah.
Because you don't have one. You know what I mean? But here's the thing though, like they start doing that single leg work, they start pushing the glute work, and you can attest this yourself personally, if not for your athletes, that their knees in like 4 or 5 weeks, all of a sudden they feel better.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden they can start doing things they weren't able to do. And
and like I put a lot of emphasis on hamstring work too as well, but like this is we've done a lot of playing around with like knees over toes and like isometric holds and things like that, and like there's certain ways it's appropriate, in certain ways it's not. Depends on if the patella glides appropriately, if they do have the inability. Like one thing that I was able to understand now, and I got this from a biomechanist, Donnie, I think his name is Donnie. I'll look him up. Hold on one second.
Okay,
Bear with me. I want to get his full name because I don't want to bastardize it. We got Donnie Raymond. He's out of DBC in Miami. He worked he worked with LeBron and all the and I think
he's a dude.
Yeah, he's that guy.
Okay.
He's with Chris Paul now. But he was saying something, and then with the patella, it should glide and over and sit into a groove.
Okay.
If when you go to squat and you go into that end range of the squat, if you can still see their kneecap, they don't have optimal function of the patella. So what ends up happening when you drive the knee over the toes, that thing hits every time. It's not sitting into that groove. And so when it hits, you're going to develop either patella tendonitis or quad tendonitis. And the reason why is because their quads are too tight. So sitting into that, and a lot of people say, well, won't that stretch out the quad? Well, no, when you do repeated motions like that, you're just basically jamming it into, basically you're jamming both the bones together over and over again. So you're going to get some tendonitis issue. Now, I could be totally messing that up, but this is the basic gist. The gist of it is like, if you can still see the kneecap when they go into a deep squat, then obviously they need to stretch their quads. They need to open up that range, get them sitting back a little bit more, like if they were do a box squat or something like that, and work the hamstrings. Build the hamstrings up, make sure that patella's, sliding in that groove, and then also stretch out the quads. Now, I did ask him, I was like, but what about like stretching, like sitting in isometric hold? He's like, that's no problem because it's not constant pounding into that tissue or into that bone. And so he's like, yeah, do that for stretching. But as far as like constant motion with knees over toes, that can be detrimental for that individual that doesn't have the optimal displacement of that patella. Okay.
Is he not big on like foam rolling for the quad tendon, for the quad in general?
I don't know per se. I think, as far as any range of motion that you can get, to increase the exercise pool is going to be beneficial in a sense. I don't know if like he's big into that. You would have to ask him. But I would say that would be somebody to get on the podcast too.
Okay.
But I would say, for me, I like to do it in the beginning stages of the workout, but I don't see it being something where you're going to enhance range of motion to the point of where, that patella is going to be sitting in that groove. So I think like, obviously soft tissue work is good, especially when you're getting it from either a massage therapist or something like that. Foam rolling can be beneficial, obviously, but I don't do it for a long time. Like I'm not going to sit there and foam roll for 20 minutes.
No, and I've seen people that do that. It's just wasted their time.
Yeah. So
like, no.
But I do understand, like I'll hit the TFL, I'll hit VMO, I'll hit all that just to basically relax the tissue in a sense. And then allow myself to get into the squat. But like I've seen it before and I've seen the differences. That knee just doesn't like the kneecap does not disappear. And I understand now that if I do continue to do that, it's going to cause achy knees. It's going to cause tendonitis issues or tendinopathy down the line. So when I'm looking at an athlete, I'm going to measure and see that first too as well. So I hope that didn't like catch anybody, like confuse the shit out of anybody, but basically
they'll hate the comments. It's fine.
Yeah, always. But I mean, that's what I learned from him, And then so for me, I do like some of the knees over the toe stuff. I do agree. Like if you have optimal function of your knee in that sense, where the kneecap is gliding through, then it'll be fine. But if not, then pull it back, work on the hamstrings, and increase the range of motion of your quads.
Right. Well, hey, I could sit here and probably talk to you for hours, and say probably I definitely could, because I think you and I, at least base knowledge wise, are cut from the same cloth. We've both kind of evolved.
Yeah.
You know, we bounce off each other for hours. I have two more questions I got to ask you.
Yep, no problem.
First one is the big one I always ask everybody, where if you had, and I'll have to make this a two-parter. I'm sorry. You had a fighter and you had a law enforcement officer. They can only train 1 day a week. What does that day look like? Is it any different between the two? Yeah. But what does that 1 day a week look like in the weight room?
Okay. I don't want to say the depends thing. But,
no, but you have to, though.
Yeah.
Gotta cover your bases, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll get torn apart in the comments, man.
It's all right. I would say, like, you know, if a lot of them, if they're coming to me for the first time, it's like, let's maximize our ability to move. So we'll do some type of gait pattern movement. We'll do some type of press, pull, you know, rotation, twist, whatever you want to call it, anti-rotation work too as well. Squat and hinge. And depending on the athlete is dependent upon what exercise I'm going to select for that.
Okay.
You know, as far as intensity and volume and all that, that's going to also depend on what the goal is. You know, I would start off always with some type of main movement. Primarily is going to be either a squat or a hinge, because you're just going to require more muscle fibers in that particular movement. So whether that be, you know, an RDL, whether that be a split stance squat, something like that, and then move our way into some type of pressing motion. With the pressing motions, we may go unilateral, you know, or if I wanted to do some type of floor press, I would do that. But I would always vary it depending on the day. And then some type of pulling motion, either horizontal or vertical, and I'll switch that up each week. Okay. And then anti-rotation with cables or some type of like pull through movement, and then a carry at the end.
Okay. Any type of like farmer's carry, wheelbarrow,
yeah,
like anything like hugging, bear hug, like
suitcase carry, waiter's carry, heavy med ball carry, sandbag carries, stuff like that.
Okay. All right. And then knowing if, you know, Coach Daru, Phil, 10 years ago, if you knew now what you wish you knew then, yeah, what would you have done different? So if someone's like 20 years old coming out of college,
yeah,
what should they be thinking about doing that you made mistakes on?
I would definitely look at I would pay more attention to the individual as opposed to having to stick to one particular thought of training or whatever, one particular methodology. I would look at it from a subjective standpoint and understand the athletes are all different in some capacity. So knowing that first and foremost, and then that will dictate the training process going forward, as opposed to trying to fit everything in one batch, because that's, you know, the dogmatic approach is something that I try to steer away from as much as possible, and have more versatility in my thought process when it comes down to training individuals, especially with so many different demands and so many different variables in everyday life and in the sport or wherever they're doing. So looking at that from the individual's perspective, and then also fine tuning the assessment process and understanding like proper evaluation so that I can implement the training process effectively and efficiently, so that there is progression going forward and we're not overtraining or undertraining anything that need be.
Right. All right. Before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug? If anyone wants to find you, like how do they find you, your programs, all that jazz?
Yeah, just my website, darustrong.com. My Instagram is @darustrong, and I have a YouTube channel. So just search Phil Daru and I'll pop up. Okay.
So we'll put all those links below, and we'll let you go on your way. I'll have you stick around for like 2 minutes after I cut recording, and we'll get some information and get you out of here. I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Thanks, bro.